Welcome, folks. It's Craig Bushon Show, live from Heroes Night Out. As you know, I've been out here several times before. This is a great organization. Heroes Night Out reaches out to veterans. It's a nonprofit. You got to check them out, heroesnightout.org. I got to put a plug in for them because they've opened this place up for us tonight. It's a very important show that we're doing. It's very specific and it's very exact. And what I have in my hand is a book, and it's a book that you need to read. And to my left is the person who wrote this book. And what's so exciting about Melanie Davis is that why she wrote this book is going to be very interesting to you. There's a great backstory here. And for those of you that are in the military, who a lot of you pay attention to this show, a lot of you follow this show, please pay attention to this interview because this is something that it's very rare that I'll go out and I'll specifically do an individual program like this outside of my regular programming. But this is so important. It's such a big deal. And there's a lot of great people involved with it that I said, you know what, this is the cause. This is why we do this type of programming and why we've launched this show this way. And I want to introduce you folks right now to the author of this Triumph book, The Heroes, Melanie Davis. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good stuff, you know.
I'm very excited.
Welcome to Heroes Night Out.
Yeah, I've been here before.
I know.
Great place. Great spirit. I love the...
Well, the good news is that places like this exist, but part of what makes places like Heroes Night exist is people like you doing things like this. Tell a little story. Tell me the story about how this came about. You're a historian. You know, you're a person that really pays attention to history, and because that defines us where we're at these days. So tell people, you know, Reader's Digest about what you're doing.
Okay, well, I consider myself a personal historian, meaning that I help people to preserve their stories, and I do that in a way that allows them to be the person speaking. So it's first-person accounts. And I wrote this book, The Triumph Book Heroes. It's a collection of stories from veterans from World War II on up through our recent conflicts, as many different wars as I could find veterans from, and many different ranks are represented. The reason that I wrote this book originally was because I felt like our country needed more patriotism. And who loves our country more than those who are willing to die for it? But it was actually in the course of writing the book that I found out that I had been an ignorant civilian because I had no idea what they go through, what our real heroes go through when they return home from war. And I ended up finding stories that represent such challenges as homelessness, unemployment, amputation, all kinds of injuries, PTSD. Even veteran suicide is featured in this book. And it's called The Triumph Book Heroes. And that triumph is really a key word because even though the stories represent so many different challenges, all of the stories show how these veterans got through those kinds of adversities. Sure. And you might wonder, well, where's the triumph in veteran suicide? But the last story in the book comes from the mother of a Navy corpsman. He served 4 tours back to back to back to back in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he just, the summer of 2011, he barricaded himself on the base in Corpus Christi with a gun. And after a 4-hour negotiation on the phone with his mother and with military leaders, he killed himself. But his mother was on the phone with him for 4 hours and was able to learn what his fears were, what his hallucinations were. And in the course of writing that story with her, we were able to really pinpoint some of the different milestones, if you will, that kind of brought him to that. And it's a triumph story because there's so much that we learned from that we can use to prevent veteran suicide, which, as you may know, is at a terrific rate. I've heard it's as many as 18 a day, with veteran dying about every 80 minutes.
Right.
So
the statistics they're staggering.
Yeah.
And you know, the bottom line is that the modern day war is not like the war of the past, you know, and the cycling of soldiers and how often they're seeing battle. And in each generation, you know, fights their own demons that they bring home with them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, back in World War II, they called it being shell-shocked, you know, and it just evolves. And, you know, in the advancements, you know, when you go out there and we have more advanced military, we also have more advanced adversaries who do things to us too, right? So our military is our line of defense, and wonderful people, you know, 1% basically, barely, of this country serve. So it's a very small number.
Yeah, and it also tends to be very generational, and that kind of points to one of the main purposes of the book. it moved away from just being about increasing patriotism to actually increasing awareness and appreciation.
Sure.
Because it's generational, which means, I think it's something like 2 to 7% is what I've heard actually serve in the military. And within families, which means the vast majority of our nation are really not connected to the military. I am not. Actually, there's one story in there that comes from my great uncle, who was a bomber that was shot down over France and ended up in a German prisoner of war camp. And it's a great story. It's very Hogan Heroes.
Right, sure.
But other than that, it's not like I have military in my family. So I seriously didn't know what they go through. And I believe the majority of our country doesn't understand their challenges. And that's a real problem, because not knowing what their challenges are, we're really not meeting their needs. And that is why the veteran suicide rate is so high. I truly believe that. And I don't believe it's because we don't care as much as the fact that we don't know.
We don't know what we don't know, and education is key. And ladies and gentlemen, it's so important that, you pay attention, because such a small number of people serve at any given time in this country. And that means the majority of us are not serving, but yet we're the support for them. When they come home, we're that infrastructure. And, if there's a family living in a community, it's what we can do to help that community support that veteran when they come back. And, what you're doing is so fantastic, because, there's a dark place where a lot of these people, a lot of veterans who come back that are affected from a number of different issues, they live in a dark place, and you're allowing them to shine a little light in there. Tell me, but let's back up just a little bit. How did you really start? What made you really get into this? I mean, here you are. Then you have a book, a substantial book. Yeah. I mean, it's not like 40 pages long.
It's actually technically my 4th book.
Yeah.
Yeah. It all really began with my own adversity, my own tragedy, if you will. I have a daughter that...
let's see that.
I brought my little book. This is my first book. I guess you could call it my 5th book. This is my very first book. This is my daughter, Bryn. She was 7 months old when she passed away from SIDS. And I'm a writer, so I'd always kept a journal of her, and I kept that journal going after she died. When I first went through that experience some weeks later, I wrote all that I went through, what it was like finding her in her crib, the ambulance ride, praying that she would be okay and knowing she wasn't going to make it. Our van broke down in the middle of the Sierra Nevada mountains on our way to bury her in Carson City, Nevada, and had to be towed into Reno with her little body and coffin inside. But then I picked up that journal again many months later, and I wrote what I learned from that experience. Because if you had asked me before I went through that how I would react to losing this beautiful baby, I would have just said, lock me away in a dark room and don't check on me. I just would have thought that would be the end of it. And the truth is, if you think about it, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Absolutely.
It can come from, our heroes are really suffering it because they see so much trauma. But, finding a child dead in a crib, I think, would probably qualify as a trauma. But what I ended up doing is later in the journal, I actually wrote what I learned. And what I found out is this worst nightmare, this is a mother's worst nightmare, wasn't as debilitating as I thought it would be. And, I say that because of this experience, I personally know that God lives. For me, it's beyond faith. I know that He did. I know that I was supported. I even felt physically a spiritual comfort that I never felt before or since. So for me, it was a growth. And I have to say, I felt a very strong sense of purpose, even on the day she died. And that purpose is what I'm doing today. I wrote this story, I wrote what I learned, and I had an audience in mind. It was my children and my posterity, because I wanted them not just to know they had a sister, but also to know that I got through a tragedy and that they can get through theirs, because we're all going to experience hardship in our lives.
Absolutely.
And so that was the purpose of the book. Well, when you get through something difficult, people will come to you and say, my best friend just lost her baby. What can I say or do? They know that you got through it, so you become a source, a resource.
And a mentor.
And a mentor. So then what I did was I would make a copy of this book, and I would give it to them. I'd say, well, just share my story. Maybe there's something in there that can help your friend. I probably shared 100 copies of that book. And I ended up, I don't want to take too much time with my story, but I ended up helping people in the bereavement industry, people who are grieving, to write their stories and preserve their loved ones in this way. And I created a workbook called the Triumph Program, and it actually ended up being a workbook that helps people through all kinds of adversity.
Sure.
And it's just writing their tragedy story, finding purpose and meaning what they've been through, and looking to the future. As I wrote that book, I worked with hospices and bereavement counselors, and I would run groups. And they'd work during the week in the workbook, and they'd come back and we'd have group activities. And one thing that I always said was that you can overcome grief. And to me, it's how you define it. It doesn't
Sure.
mean you don't
right.
miss what you've lost, but it just means you can find joy and purpose in life again.
Yeah, I've told my viewers for years that it's not the situation that defines us, it's what we do in that situation that does.
Yeah.
And it's therapeutic to face the things really that we don't want to face. And we're stronger than we give ourselves credit for. And and for those of us who have a weakness in a place, if we can surround ourselves with the right people, or get involved in reading the right book that gets us, and I want to talk a little bit about this workbook that you have, okay? Because it's about working through your problems, and it's not done in one day. It's a project, and it takes time. And surrounding yourself with people who care, or surrounding yourself with literature that helps bring you that self-worth that you have.
Well, one thing that I always say is that you can't do something until you believe you can do it.
Sure.
And that's really where the Triumph Book Heroes becomes important. I wrote it originally to increase patriotism. Then when I wrote it, I realized, wow, I didn't know, and most of our country doesn't know, what our veterans go through, what our military goes through. And, statistics just don't create the kind of compassion and concern to make a difference. It's knowing their stories, appreciating them as individuals and as humans, and just knowing what sacrifices have been made for us. And I feel it's so important we know their stories. But what I found out is after I published the book, which I published it on 11/11/11, I really hustled to get that date because it's just I couldn't pass it up.
Sure, absolutely.
And but when I published it, I began sharing it with veterans, and that's when I found out how powerful a resource this book is to help our veterans, because they could read these stories and see how did this sergeant get through a double amputation and continue to enjoy life? Or how did Matthew Brown get through PTSD? There's a story from a veteran from the Iraq War, invasion of Fallujah. He was shot on Veterans Day, went through terrible PTSD, was disabled, and got through it. And the story is really great because it's told from his perspective, his mother's perspective, and his wife's perspective. And, but you have to believe you can accomplish something before you can do it. And so this book can give veterans hope. Once they read the book, then what happens is they say, wow, I can see that I have a valuable story too, which is really what I want them to take from that. And then they have a desire to share their stories, where typically in the military culture, they tend not to talk about what they've been through. And that's kind of the opposite of what they need to do to heal.
Sure. It is there is definitely a wall, a separation between the civilian life and the military and veteran life, and we need to break down those barriers because there's kids and there's spouses and there's friends but before we move on, because I do really want to talk about your workbook, this cover, and folks, when you get through this cover and you get into right at the beginning in the dedication, there's a picture of a gentleman,
very handsome Marine.
Absolutely.
Johnny Zaladonis is his name.
And tell us really quick about that.
Well, as I was writing the book, I was going to a gym, and he was a trainer there. And I noticed he had this tattoo on his forearm, just inside of it, and it was 2 dog tags. And I thought, wow, I bet there's quite a story behind that tattoo. And so I thought, what a neat story to write a story around a tattoo. And I went up to him one day, and I asked him about it, and he told me, and it was surprising. I thought it was an even better story than I was expecting. It was his sister's dog tags on his arm, and she had his dog tags on her arm.
Interesting.
And they were both deployed to Iraq at the same time, and so that's why they did that. And so I was very excited to get this brother-sister story. And then as I was going along, I really wanted to get the cover done, and so I asked him if he would be willing to come down to a photography studio and put on the Marine uniform, the camis, and hold this book up above his head. There's a symbol to this book in my other books, and that's they hold a book above their head, and it represents their stories.
Sure.
And in this picture, he looks as if he's just stepped up off the battlefield to stand up and hold this book above his head. This is the greatest gift that he has to give to the world. And so he came down as the model for that, and he's also the model that's on the cover of the workbook, which is
let's see that too.
This is a picture of him sitting back to back with a child, and he's writing, and the child's reading, and the message is that the story that you preserve will be passed on to the next generation. So he did those pictures, and I was going to get his story, but a few months before I published the book, he was a victim of PTSD-induced suicide, and I'll never forget when I got that call.
Sure.
And so I dedicate this book to him and to all the heroes who have fallen to that unseen wound.
Absolutely. And it's stories that need to be told, and more of them need to be told. More light needs to be brought into that darkness. And it's a place that's hard for a lot of people to go to, but through workbooks, through writings, through the words of people who've experienced it from multiple generations, it allows people, many of you out there, who, when you're in that place of darkness that you think that you're alone, you're not. If you really can take the time and really get the effort up to go out there and look, there are things out there. It's hard, there's no doubt about that, but there are ways to get your triumph, and you are a hero, and it's so important to never forget that. And there's a movie. Yeah. I mean, now you go from a book, you've got this, you have the workbook, and you've got this great book that you've authored, but now the next, we're a very visual society, right?
Yeah.
Pictures mean a lot, video means a lot. So now tell us about the movie that you're trying to put together here.
Well, I do get out and speak a lot, and I talk about the healing power of writing our stories and sharing our stories and finding triumph in our lives and serving others. But a lot of times I'll speak to politicians and media and mental health professionals, but unless I go to a kind of a R&R or a getaway that the veterans are at, they don't come.
Right.
And it's so important to get this message to them. And some veterans are literally stuck at home on the couch not leaving. And so I wanted to put this message into a media that is really easy to absorb.
Right.
And that's through film. So
absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, I think we have a poster right here on the side. I think there it is. Lots of props here, folks. Limited space. So this is what a great cover, by the way. I mean, this is great.
Well, I got to tell you that there's a story behind where I got this picture. One of the stories in the Triumph Book Heroes comes from Corporal Tyler W. Hill. He was a combat photographer for photojournalist is what he called it. Combat photojournalist for the Marine Corps. And his story in the book is told through pictures. It's really awesome. He's got all these different pictures and the story behind it. But there's this one picture that you just had to see it in color. And it's actually photoshopped. The ground part is one picture, and this is the soldier sitting on the rock looking out across this war-torn city or building. And then he photoshopped the sky in, and I love it because the sun is shining down on the soldier as he's sitting on the rock. And it just, to me, it represents where our military are, what our heroes are, that they've been through this awful war, but the sun is still going to shine on them. And it represents something we all go through because, life can be considered a war zone.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think even though it's a military-looking picture, it represents all of us. The thing he told me about this soldier when he took this picture is that it was an anniversary of the death of one of his buddies as they were out in war. And he had gone off to sit on this rock and just have a few moments alone. So it really is an emotional picture, but it's also a very uplifting one to look at. So the title of the film is Heroes Triumph, Winning the Battles After the War. And they certainly come home and continue to fight. And and I want them to know that they can win those battles and to have that hope and believe that it's possible. I've had some pretty tremendous stories that are featured in this film. It's a documentary film. It's basically it's encompassing the sharing of stories, but really the collecting of stories too, as I go about putting together another Heroes book, a couple of them actually. I'm writing a book called Heroes 2, and that's spelled T-O-O. Mm-hmm. And these are stories from families of our heroes.
Sure.
And so one of the stories that I'm really excited is coming from the mother of Aaron Menken. He was actually a Marine combat what's the word? Not the one that takes the pictures, the one that writes. The, correspondent.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
It took me a second to think
That's
of that.
all right.
That's what he. In fact, he might have been out there the same time as Tyler Hill. I want to find out if they knew each other. But Aaron Menken was in a convoy, and he was at the back of the line. And it's funny because Oliver North was in the first vehicle, paying a visit, and they hit an IED, armored assault vehicle. There were 18 in it, and 6 of the 18 were killed immediately. And it flew up in the air, and all of the rest in it were injured. And he caught fire in his face and his hands, and he inhaled it. And it's quite a story, but he ended up really being damaged, very disfigured. And he was on Lou Dobbs, I believe it was, and there was a man in L.A. that saw him, and he said, I'm not going to let that man go through life with that face, because there's no plastic surgeon at Brook Army Medical where he had been. There was one that I was told was only there for a month and left. And so the regular surgeons were trying to help him. There's only so much they could do.
Sure, absolutely.
And so they began doing operations for Aaron. And he's to date he's had, I believe, around 65 surgeries, all through this organization that was founded after, for him, really, called Operation Mend. And since then, they have been able to assist 72 other disfigured, wounded heroes. But the story is actually being told by his mother, and Diana Menken Phelps. And I've told you a little bit of Aaron's story, but I haven't told you what she has to share, and it's just phenomenal. So it's stories from family as well as stories from veterans.
Sure. And how do people get involved? I mean, obviously, all this takes time.
Yeah.
It takes money. It takes effort. A lot of people out there, they look for ways to get involved. How can they, donate? How can they get behind the things that you're doing?
First of all, the Triumph of Heroes was written to raise money as well as awareness.
Yes.
So one of the great things you can do is just buy a copy of this book, and please read it, because you'll do 2 things. You will help bring money in for these projects, but you will also come away really appreciating your heroes, in fact, loving them. As I wrote this book, I came up with a national campaign called Love Your Veterans, because they loved us first when they were willing to die for us. And I have a really neat logo that was actually drawn by a veteran. It's a heart shape with a flag inside that says Love Your Veterans. So you can show you love your veterans by purchasing a copy of this book. And that's something that will be ongoing. As I write more books, they will all raise money for this. It will provide a copy of the Triumph program. The Triumph program is this process to help our veterans be able to write and discover their own Triumph stories and work through the hardships they've been through and find purpose and meaning and joy in life.
Well, a lot of families look for what they can do for their veteran family member. This could be a good gift. It could be something good to give them.
Definitely to let them read Heroes book, because it leads them to want to write their story. We'll be putting the Triumph program into some different ways of facilitating it. One of them is something we're going to call the Triumph Adventures, where we'll take them and kind of give them a chance to get away. There's a lot of these types of activities going on right now where veterans go and ride horses or go skiing. And this is just working something that's really got a purpose and a little more focus, so that when they leave that weekend or that week or however long they've spent, they'll come away with their story, and they'll come away with having taken the time to be introspective and really do some work. Sure. To work through that.
It takes effort from everybody. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
But there's some specific ways that they can support the film. But before we talk about that, it's really important to share one of the most beautiful things that's going to be in this film, and that is a very special song.
Absolutely right. And I think there's somebody off camera here we need to bring on right now.
Yeah,
he's the only guy in the room with a hat on, and he's in the right place because he's in Texas. So
I can take it off.
No, you can keep it on. That's all right. It's very fitting. This is Mr. Matt Snook. Welcome to the program. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and both of you for traveling in today. And I'm so glad we could hook up, and we're so glad to team up with you. And know that all the stuff we're talking about, folks, will be posted on the Craig Bushon Show. It'll be up on my website. It'll also be up linked on Be First in Business, Be First in Media, on our Facebook page. please make sure you find your way to this literature, and it's a great read too. I already started reading it online, by the way. It's a great read.
You can read a free story. It's actually the story of a Tuskegee Airman, Calvin Spann. And,
that's right.
It's a wonderful story.
But I got to tell you, I also listened to the song. Okay, by this band to your left, and wow.
Can I share with you
go right ahead.
This is just I love our story. I call it our story because it really is. Both Matt and I, we met just a few months ago, really, last April, and right now it's what is it? November 2012. But in April we were both out in Mineral Wells at a hog hunt, Wounded Warrior hog hunt, put on by Dana Bowman. And Matt was there singing, and I was there giving free copies of the book to all the wounded and saying thank you. And I think it was the third day we got to sit down and talk, finally. We'd only seen each other, and we got to talk, and I was sharing with him the books and the program and the things that I was doing. And he took out his guitar, and he played this song for me. It's called Battle Cry. And I cried because it's so profound. And I said, "Oh, Matt, I bet the veterans, the wounded, just love that song." And Matt, I'm going to let you finish telling the story from here.
Well, I asked if you wanted to hear a song because from what what Melanie had to say, and her purpose and what she I've been doing some Wounded Warrior events and things like that for the last probably 6 or 7 years. And when I heard Melanie's story about what she was doing with her book and the peer-to-peer mentoring and hoping that the stories would, the song I'd written like 6 or 7 years ago made sense. And I felt really strong about that message and that hook, and finally met its path. And so I asked her if I could play a song for her, and she said yes. And when I sang the song, I think it just was it was a match for sure, and I was glad it found a home. But
so Matt's song Battle Cry is going to be in the film. We're actually going to do some neat things to have Matt play this song, and it's the theme song of the film. It's in the trailers of the film right now, and
it's an amazing just to be able to sit on something, like waiting for the right moment. I always tell my fans know that I always say through the grace of God, because that's the only thing I know how to say that kind of makes sense to me when I don't know how to make sense of something. And and just to really wait and to let something just simmer, that's a hard thing to do, especially in your industry. And that you had to wait for that special moment, and then there it came. It just showed up.
Well, I think the message is it deals around thoughts of suicide. That's a pretty heavy topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I wanted to make sure that it was treated right. And I think that I don't really know sometimes, like you said, by the grace of God, sometimes things just kind of pour out of you. And I have a feeling that was through multiple experiences I'd had over the time I'd worked with them. And one thing I do notice is the military, they're the last type of person to ask for assistance. But music, I kind of cheat, because music puts you in an environment to where some of the barriers come down, some of the walls come down, and you see folks, start talking to each other that have had similar circumstances. And I'm very glad to be in those circles at times. And I noticed that sometimes the people I think that do the best work within our military are the military. Peer-to-peer mentoring is important. So if she started telling me what she was doing about, with her stories, then I was like, I haven't played this song for like anybody but my family, but I think Melanie's going to hear it. And that's it just made sense. And I was waiting because I knew. I couldn't believe when I thought of the hook. I'm in the fight of my life, hear my battle cry, and I always Google. I Google hooks to see just what's been written on something before I take off on. And when I Googled Battle Cry and I couldn't find a song on that, I was like, wow, somebody's missed the boat.
It's like a veil that gets lifted. You're like, how could this be that no one's written about this? And it's because, in my opinion, the right person was not there yet. And then there you are, and you wrote it. And I got to tell you something, folks. In my career, I've listened to a lot of music. A lot. And as soon as you hear this song, and we have links up on the site, and you're going to play a little bit for us tonight, aren't you?
Okay, sure.
I hope you play.
I hope he does. He's got a guitar around here somewhere.
I want to hear it.
And because, folks, it is something that it's amazing, and that that special quality that somebody, when they have it, you know it immediately. And that's what I noticed when I first heard that song.
Oh,
Battle
thanks,
Cry.
man.
And I got to tell you, and I'm serious about that, because it takes a special type of song when you're talking about a serious. Listen, there's nothing more serious than committing suicide. It's very, very hard, no matter what the circumstance is. So it's hard to write something like that. But then to deliver it in a way that's true and it's real, because you can't personally experience it and then write about it. Okay? You have to absorb what it is, to see it, be around it, or investigate it, and then find that place inside that allows you to tell that story. And that's what you've done, and you should be applauded for that. And that's a special talent and that's a very unique quality.
I appreciate that. I'll just set it up to say this, that I don't know where it all came from, but once once I had the hook line and the setup there, I thought I totally started. I had a vision of a younger veteran that was in a really dark place, going in, to get a haircut and a shave, and he's talking to the barber, and I guess I'll give a little bit of away, but the barber ends up being, in my eyes, he was like a Vietnam vet. And so you've got a younger generation that's looking for resources and for help from an older generation, and truly they're the only ones that can really speak to that. And so that's about as true as peer as it gets.
Sure.
And that was kind of, and when the story kind of appeared to me like that, I thought, yeah, we can write this. This will be all right.
Absolutely.
It has a positive twist because
Sure.
of that too, which is neat. We're talking about, it's a song about suicide, but actually it's a song about, I would say, being diverted from suicide through the experiences of the older Vietnam veteran, counseling the younger one about how he was able to
Sure.
to make his peace.
Well, in this song, religion is part of the song. Talking with the gentleman today with Melanie, which was a really nice conversation, as someone put it, when you're at war, things happen. When you get home, you got to start putting them in places and figuring out how to start dealing with things.
Sure.
And not everybody's going to look to religion as the rehabilitation, but that's what we used in this song. And whatever that is for those people, I think the key, it's more about the peer-to-peer mentoring. I'm not a doctor by any means, but I've been around enough military folks to see the positive effects of peer-to-peer mentoring and how important that is.
Sure, it's a strong medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, that mentoring, that peer-to-peer, what is it really? It's relating your story.
Yeah.
It's
That's
about
exactly
storytelling.
Right. Yeah.
And letting your story heal another. And when you do that, you heal yourself.
And I want to make sure that we have enough time here to tell people, folks, you can go download the song. I think another way that they can contribute is it's I think $2. It's something very affordable. Tell the folks how they can do that.
Well, if you go to loveyourveterans.org and you can click on the banner that's about the Heroes Triumph, and it'll take you to another page where you can click ways to join. And we actually outline some ideas on that page about ways you can help us that are free. Don't cost anything at all. We have a space on our website where we actually have a number of banners that are, I'd love to get up on billboards one day, but all these graphics, and just you as them cover on your Facebook page. You can put them on the bottom of your emails. There's a lot there that you can do that helps us. It doesn't cost you anything. But if you'd like to contribute and help us to be able to make the film, one of the things you can do is download Matt's song Battle Cry for $2. And then there's a number of other increments. You can end up with a copy of the Triumph Book Heroes autographed. You can get a movie poster, and all of those things build. So if you help by donating one of the larger amounts, you're still going to get the song.
And you get something
you get
in return.
Everything plus that extra.
That's a wonderful thing. You not only get to give to the folks,
you get
give to really a cause that more of us need to get involved in. You get something in return. And hey, does it make sense here? Should we take a break here, or should we? You want to take a break real quick, and then we'll take a minute. And what we'll do, just to make it easy for you, I think we'll just splice it in the end of this, because we're on the road right now. Because I want to make sure the microphone's right for you, and that you can set up here. And then we're going to hear Mr. Matt Snook and Battle Cry. And I'll tell you something, folks, make no mistake, this is going to go to the top of the charts.
Yes.
Make no mistake about that. Folks, I'm Craig Bushon. I want to thank you, Melanie Davis. Check this out. Check this out too. check this out too. We're going to have all these links up. She's an author. She's written more than one book. These are real things that have real substance to them. And when it comes from a place from your heart, and you know somebody really cares, then it's something you need to pay attention to. And I got to show that face again. Well, that right there, that is cheer. As a father, I'll tell you,
Yeah.
that is beauty. And I have a daughter too, so I understand. And folks, please make sure that you share this with everybody. It'll be up on Facebook. You can tweet about it. We have this on all of our CraigBushon.com, Be First in Media. And when we come back, Mr. Matt Snook. We'll be right back. Folks, welcome back to the Craig Bushon Show, live from Heroes Night Out. And as promised, from the upcoming movie, as you see right here, Heroes Triumph, Winning the Battles After the War. Let me tell you, there's sometimes, is a happy ending to dark places in life. And let me tell you, I'm very proud. This person to my left, who is the author of the song, the title track of the movie, Battle Cry. There he is, Mr. Matt Snook.
Thanks. Careful with that razor as you shave my gray whiskers like an old tore up tomcat. I'm down to my last life. Spent 2 wars in the desert, stormed in some bunkers, got hit in Fallujah, lost my leg and my last wife. Said she couldn't take it, being home all alone. The kids miss their daddy and need that time. She left me for a banker, limped off on my own. Now I'm broke as a hobo, down to my last dime. Ripple without a cause, a reason or hope. I gave all I had, I couldn't give anymore. Lord, please forgive me for my state of mind and the fight of my life. Hear my battle cry. Paid the man his money and headed for the door. I felt good, a little lighter, but bad for letting go. His trembling hands on a broom swept my hair off the floor. He said, "Son, you gotta keep your head up. I've been down that road before." Was a ripple without a cause, a reason or hope. I gave all I had, I couldn't give anymore. The Lord forgave me for my state of mind. It's in the fight of my life, He heard my battle cry. Fight of my life, He heard my battle